If more European countries decided to have their own nuclear weapons, it would be very interesting to see whether they have it as part of a collective security agreement or whether it would be to guarantee their own security. The whole command and control for the use of nuclear weapons would need to be political, not military. And who would have the say over those weapons? The country that developed them, or would there be European command and control? I think that would have to be resolved. But also, I think you might see a wider breakout to go beyond the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. So countries, whether it's Germany or Poland, Korea or Japan, might also decide that they need nuclear weapons.
When Russia could attack NATO, how European states could develop their own nuclear deterrent, and is it true that Russia is capable of fighting endlessly? All of this I'm going to discuss with my well-respected guest, Major General and strategist Mick Ryan. Thank you for joining us, Mick.
It's great to be with you.
The report of the 2026 Munich Security Conference stated that Russia is actively preparing for new conflicts in Europe, and the era of the American security umbrella is coming to an end. And at the same time, the Kremlin is significantly increasing military spending and continuing its aggressive foreign policy. I would like to ask you, how do you assess chances of Russian attack on NATO in a short-term perspective, and how this attack could look like?
Well, I think a conventional attack by the Russians on NATO in the short term is quite unlikely. They are certainly continuing a campaign of subversion and sabotage, misinformation and cognitive warfare against European countries, but a conventional attack is less likely. This is because Russia's traditional military strength lies in defending Russia. It lies in defending its own territory. When it has gone on offensive operations and expeditionary operations beyond its boundaries in places like Afghanistan and now in Ukraine, it has been found wanting. It would be found wanting in NATO as well.
Mm-hmm. You are talking about hybrid war, if I understood you correctly, yeah?
Yeah, I think this is what they would prefer to do because it's a strategy of the weak. Russia is not a strong power anymore. It is neither rich nor technologically sophisticated enough to really take on NATO countries in a stand-up fight. So it has to use the strategy of cowards to undermine European security and its population's confidence in its governments rather than a direct attack.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about American security umbrella for Europe. It has been definitely changed. How could you indicate it now, and what is it and how it works?
Well, it took the Second World War for Americans to understand that the security of Europe directly impacted the security of the United States of America. Before the Second World War, Americans hadn't really internalized that. But at the end of the Second World War, things like the Marshall Plan, the formation of NATO, and a whole range of other linkages were established to ensure that Europe could never go to war with itself again and therefore not impact on American security. That understanding has broken down in the last year. The current Trump administration does not appear to support that kind of approach. Indeed, it would rather align itself with authoritarians than democracies.
Mm-hmm. Several European states are openly supporting the idea of negotiating their own nuclear deterrent to complement the American one amid a decline in trust in the United States under Donald Trump. How could change nuclear power balance and global security architecture if this comes true?
Well, I think if more European countries decided to have their own nuclear weapons, it would be very interesting to see whether they have it as part of a collective security agreement or whether it would be to guarantee their own security. The whole command and control for the use of nuclear weapons would need to be political, not military. And who would have the say over those weapons? The country that developed them, or would there be European command and control? I think that would have to be resolved. But also, I think you might see a wider breakout to go beyond the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. So countries, whether it's Germany or Poland, Korea or Japan, might also decide that they need nuclear weapons.
We see that European security is caught in the, I would say, crossfire. I mean, literal fire from Russia and political fire from Washington. How European security could evolve efficiently under such circumstances, in your opinion?
Well, certainly European countries can afford to spend more on their own defence. The 2% barrier has been broken by many of them. 3 to 4% is probably a more realistic target, but that will require either more borrowing, higher taxes, or decreased spending on the huge number of social services that European citizens are used to receiving. They could do that. That doesn't mean, however, they have to entirely break their relationship with the United States. The United States is still the most powerful nation in the world. It is the most powerful democracy. It's in all our interests to retain good relations with the United States, even if relations at the moment under the Trump administration are not what we would like them to be.
Some experts say that Russia is capable of fighting endlessly. How do you assess Russian military, economic, and political capabilities to hold this war efficiently in a long-term perspective? And how long will Putin have enough resources?
Well, I think the only circumstances where that might be true is if Russia was defending its own territory. That is not what it is doing here. Russia is engaged in a legal war of territorial expansion and aggression. Under these circumstances, I do not believe Russia can fight endlessly, even though it may have mobilized the resources to fight for longer than anyone anticipated. Russia is not capable of an endless war in a expeditionary sense, only in defending its own homeland.
When it comes to Russian human resources, in your opinion, when Putin is ready to global mobilization, I mean to general mobilization?
Well, he's not shown any inclination to do that because he knows there's a cost to his regime for doing that. Certainly, he has not demonstrated the inclination to mobilize people from key Russian cities, including Moscow. He would rather recruit people from Africa, South Asia, and lie to them about where they might be serving in the Russian armed forces. I think, once again, it would have to be a national emergency where Russia was defending its own territory, where it could get away with general mobilization of the population. So I think this is a pressure point. This is where Ukraine can hurt Russia. And if Ukraine can do, as the Minister of Defense Fedorov has said, increase casualties to 50,000 a month, this will force Putin for the first time, I think, to really confront, is Ukraine worth the casualties? I hope it does. Because like all Ukrainians, we would like to see peace under the kind of circumstances that are favourable to Ukraine this year, not favourable to Russia.
Peace talks in Geneva. How do you assess prospects of trilateral negotiations in general, and do you believe in successful outcome?
I think we are very unlikely to see any major outcomes of the next round of peace talks in Geneva. The Russians have put in charge of it a chief negotiator who's been proven to be inept and unable to really negotiate effectively with Ukrainians in the past. I think that's the Russians signaling that they're just playing for time. The fact of the matter is Putin desperately needs something that he can sell as a victory to the Russian people. He does not have that at the moment. And therefore, I believe he will continue dragging out negotiations and leading the Trump administration down a garden path until he thinks he can get something that looks like a victory. That's unlikely, but I think he will continue delaying.
How could be solved territorial issue? I would say the most difficult in these negotiations.
Well, the simplest way to do it is the Russians go home, but I don't think the Russians appear willing to do that. This is a very difficult political and societal challenge for Ukraine, given the laws around territorial integrity and the fact that Russia has seized Ukrainian territory illegally over the period of time, not since 2022, but 2014. So I think this is going to have to be something that potentially could be parked. There could be a ceasefire along current lines, and then the situation with territory and what happens with territory might be subject to further negotiations. But I think this is such a consequential, such a difficult issue, it's hard to see it being resolved in the short term.
Rubio flew to Orban and Fico. They are known for maintaining ties with Moscow, opposing military aid to Ukraine, and previously even blocking EU sanctions against Russia. What is the main interest of cooperation between the US, Slovakia, and Hungary?
Well, I think it's more him signalling that his president feels some kind of fealty, or at least feels that they have similar political interests in how they govern their countries. And in fact, I think the US Secretary of State talking with those people straight after he gave what was a reasonably conciliatory speech at the Munich Security Conference indicates that the speech really wasn't conciliatory. It was exactly what J.D. Vance said last year, just sugar-coated.
I got you. Zelensky said that Trump offered security guarantees for 15 years, but Kyiv requires 30 or 50 years. How do you understand American logic in terms of security guarantees and its time frames?
Well, I'm not sure there is a logic to the American offer of 15 years, and I think this is something that could be part of the negotiation, whether it's 15 or 30 or 100 years as the UK agreement is. I think the most important thing is getting some kind of security guarantee from the United States. And when that's in place, it can be negotiated to have that lengthened over time. So even a 10-year guarantee, I think, would be good as a start point, and then immediately start negotiating for lengthening it at the back end.
Mm-hmm. According to publications of foreign press, there are 3 levels of security guarantees in case of Russian re-attack on Ukraine. The first one is military response of Ukrainian army and political response of European Union. The second step is military presence of European troops. And the third one is American troops in Ukraine after 74 hours of Russian escalation. We know that during the whole period of Russian aggression, the main thing that USA and Europe want to avoid, and it is the biggest fear, it's a direct confrontation with Russia, what can lead to nuclear war. So why USA and Europe are ready to allow this confrontation now in order to security guarantees for Ukraine?
Well, I think there's sufficient evidence that the presence of European and American troops on the ground might be a sufficient deterrent against further Russian activity. We know this from Asia, where American presence on the ground in South Korea has guaranteed that country's security and significantly reduced North Korean aggression. It hasn't entirely removed it, but it's significantly reduced it over the period since 1953. We would be hoping that the presence on the ground of American troops and European troops, just as American troops in Europe guaranteed the peace there after the Second World War, might do the same for Ukraine well into the future.
There are many conversations and speculations about the end of the war by summer. Under what circumstances this scenario can come true?
Well, I think there's only 2. One is that there is a very significant shift in the technology and tactics on the battlefield, and one side or the other makes an important breakthrough that achieves some kind of operational impact and destruction of large numbers of the other side's forces. The only other reasonable circumstance that might be applicable is a significant change in will, where the Ukrainian government or the Russian government decides they've reached the point where it is no longer worth fighting and that a political accommodation now becomes an imperative. I'm not sure either of those circumstances are possible in the next 6 months.
We clearly understand which leverages United States can use to put pressure on Ukraine to get concessions from Kiev. But it's not very clear which efficient tools US can use to get concessions from Moscow in current period of time. What can you say about it?
Well, I think under the Trump administration, to their credit, they have provided more intelligence to the Ukrainian armed forces to support deeper strikes inside Russia. They have also been capturing the shadow fleet that Russia uses to generate foreign revenue from its oil industry. It could expand both of those initiatives, but it could also do things like provide Tomahawk missiles. It could provide air defense missiles of a greater quantity and in more timely fashion so that air defense batteries aren't running out of missiles halfway through Russian attacks. I think stepping up training of Ukrainian forces inside Ukraine by Ukraine's partners, including America, but including other countries, including Australia, would also help.
Mick, thank you very much for this interview, for this conversation. I appreciate your expertise. Thank you again and have a good day.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk with you.